Hello, my name is Jeff Farbman from the Wallace Center at Winrock International. Welcome to this National Good Food Network webinar entitled How Regional Food System Investment Creates More Equitable Communities. The Wallace Center is especially pleased to host this webinar. In our national position, we have seen amazing community economic success, with local government and philanthropy investing in the success of their food system. We have seen a powerful combination of building true and sustainable wealth in the communities, as well as the health of the eaters and increased interest from other sectors that comes from the economic success and well-being of the people in the community. This webinar focuses on one aspect of that virtuous cycle, how food systems have empowered historically disempowered communities. These three case studies are brought to you to inspire and instruct. And in talking to these panelists preparing for this webinar, I can't imagine that you won't be taking notes furiously the entire webinar. I'd like to invite Andrew Dumont to begin the webinar describing the project and resource that inspired this webinar. Quick bio of Andrew. Andrew Dumont is a community development analyst at the Federal Reserve Board, where he leads the board's work on rural development, affordable housing, and other place-conscious community and economic development policy areas. Prior to joining the board, Andrew worked at Pathway Lending, a community development financial institution serving Tennessee and Alabama, where he worked as a program specialist, structured and underwriting small business loans to further the organization's economic development priorities. Andrew has a master's degree in public policy from the George Washington University, a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York at Buffalo, and is a certified public accountant. Andrew.
Hey, Jeff. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you to everybody that joined the webinar. Glad to have you here. Really excited to be putting this on and partnering with the Wallace Center and National Good Food Network, USDA, and the organizations represented among our esteemed panelists. Just wanted to really quickly give an overview of the Federal Reserve Board. I suspect that there are some folks on the webinar that maybe are less familiar with us than some of our other stakeholders and just why we would be engaged in this work. So wanted to provide a quick overview as well as some of the work we've been doing on regional food systems recently and the work that we have upcoming. And then just introduce our moderator and let the day proceed. So one thing you'll want to know about the Federal Reserve is we're pretty conservative, which means that you get this lovely disclaimer that you can see on your screen, and just says that all of the opinions and thoughts that I'm providing on this webinar are mine and not representative necessarily of an official board position. So the Federal Reserve System, it consists of 12 regional reserve banks that are located across the country, as well as the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, which is located in Washington, D.C. It's a very interesting structure. The 12 reserve banks are independent, congressionally chartered organizations with their own board of directors and presidents. They're located in the areas identified on this map. And they each have their own focus areas. And if you're not familiar with the Federal Reserve Bank in your area, I definitely suggest that you check them out. They're putting out a lot of great resources on community economic development, some on regional food systems, and many others on a variety of other topics that might be relevant to you. So definitely check them out. If you're not familiar with where to locate what Federal Reserve Bank district you're in, we have this website, fedcommunities.org. At the upper right of that webpage, there's a little tool, Find Your Fed District. You can go in there, type in your address, and it'll get you linked up with your local Federal Reserve Bank. So definitely recommend that you check that out to find your Federal Reserve District, but also just check out fedcommunities.org. That's where we try to aggregate all of the material being put out by all 12 reserve banks and the Federal Reserve Board. So there's a lot of great material on there. Definitely suggest that you check it out. And so why does the Federal Reserve focus on community economic development? Many of you, your knowledge of the Fed may begin and end with Janet Yellen and interest rate policy, and that's fine. That's where most people's knowledge of the Fed begins and ends. But we actually do a great deal more than that. And our community development mission is squarely tied to our responsibility to promote effectively the goals of maximum employment, stable prices, and moderate long-term interest rates, really around maximum employment. So how do we ensure that our economic policies are reaching everybody so that we can really achieve that goal of maximum employment in our country? And with this idea that economically and financially healthy consumers and communities promotes more stable regions and a more robust economy overall. So how does that translate into regional food systems? Well, as many of you on this call are probably familiar, regional food systems present opportunities to advance economic outcomes and economic opportunity for communities around our country through the creation of new businesses, new jobs, through the strengthening of existing businesses and jobs. And so that's really where we came to this effort from, and spent the last couple of years partnering with the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, as well as our colleagues over at USDA in both Agricultural Marketing Service and Rural Development to generate a resource that we put out last month, this publication called Harvesting Opportunity, the Power of Regional Food System Investments to Transform Communities. It's freely available on the St. Louis Fed's website. The web address should be on your screen right now. Definitely suggest that after this webinar you go and download that, thumb through it. There's a lot of great information in there. So definitely check it out. So I won't take up any more of your time, but just to introduce one of my co-conspirators on that resource, which is Jim Barham over at USDA RD. Who was a great partner in this and who's going to be the moderator for the day. So I'll go ahead and let Jim take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. I'm really excited to be able to moderate this panel today. We have some really fantastic speakers. But before I do introduce our speakers and get on with the show, I wanted to give a little bit of background for the kind of impetus behind this particular webinar, and provide a framework for maybe the lens by which we may want to be thinking about this work. The impetus is that in the book, as Andrew explained, front and center of our mission for developing this publication in terms of investments in the local regional food system space was looking through a social equity lens, and with the recognition that there are many underserved communities and communities of color that do not have the same access to investment opportunities as other communities. So I think you'll find that there's just not, while we have specific chapters on equity and inclusiveness in the food systems, that you will find throughout the book that this is a predominant topic. And so that was the impetus for having this webinar today. And with that, I just wanted to spend a minute to talk, or a couple of minutes to talk about the food value chain framework by which to kind of to provide some perspective or foundation to what we're talking about today. So I will admit, as many of you may know, I'm certainly a food hub geek, but I'm also a value chain geek, and I love frameworks. So I want to just introduce you to the framework today of how do we integrate social equity into value chain development work, and that begins by first asking the question, what is a food value chain, and how is it different from a typical supply chain? And sorry if you've heard this spiel before, but there's always a few new ears to this work, and new eyes to this work. And so when we talk about these food value chains, which is really just a short version of values-based food supply chains, which is a long word, so we just kind of short to food value chains, we really are talking about businesses along that supply chain that actually intentionally structure their core operations to certainly produce financial success. You need to be financially viable, but they're actually structuring it for social benefit as well. It's not an afterthought. It's not part of a CSR, or corporate social responsibility framework. It's It's about literally living day to day in the operations, thinking about not just financial success, but also social benefit. And with that comes a shared set of mission and operation values that are shared by the businesses, not just one business, but all the businesses along the supply chain. And of course, that is tricky work to actually develop a values-based food supply chain by which you can have shared both mission and operational values. Those mission values could be that maybe the entire supply chain wants to ensure increased farm viability, or maybe farmland preservation, or in many cases, when we're looking at values-based food supply chains, healthy food access to all, or affordable, healthy, and environmentally sound food that can be accessed by all. And then, of course, along with that would be, say, your operational values. And these are as important as the mission values, in that they really shape how you do business with the other businesses, that there will be accountability, transparency, open ongoing communication, and long-term commitment. Coupled together, these become what we mean by a food value chain. So equity, social equity, is inherent and should be part of any food value chain. Who is reaping the benefits, who has ownership, who has power over the decision making within that value chain, are all important questions that are asked. So within that, we find that successful value chains don't just pop up on their own. They need to be intentional, and when you have something intentional, it means you need people to help to craft and develop these food-based values-based food supply chains. So that, we've done some work, USDA, with our partners at the Wallace Center, looking at different food value chains across the nation. And one thing that continually pops up is that one of the best investments you can make in creating value chains is investing in value chain coordination. And so that gets to, well, this kind of investment in human and social capital and these value chain coordinators, well, what the heck is that? That's what this next slide is. It's just taking a little bit of time. So what are these value chain coordinators? And one way of kind of explaining what they are is by what they do. And so here is kind of a set of roles that value chain coordinators do. I won't go deep into any of these, but you can kind of see the idea of playing a market matchmaker, connecting the dots, playing that almost public interest broker role of matchmaking farmers with markets. Similarly, building long-term relationships within that value chain. So as the value chain is established and they set their operational mission values, value chain coordinators are essential in many cases to ensure that those original values are adhered to, and to do some troubleshooting when they're not, and to figure out what may be going wrong. And then as these value chains are developed, the value chain coordinator might find themselves either providing direct technical assistance to the value chain itself. There might be a particular part of the value chain that needs to have additional capacity built into it. Maybe it's on food safety for farmers, or maybe it's on marketing campaigns to build awareness for good food, and then so forth and so on, in which case, value chain coordinators could be policy thought leaders. They could help identify and access resources on behalf of the value chain. And as we'll find today, when they see that there might be a broken link or a missing link in the chain, let's say there's no distribution, they may themselves incubate a business or help incubate a business to fulfill the functions necessary for the value chain to thrive. So some of the really cutting edge work on value chain development actually comes from WealthWorks, which I highly recommend anyone interested in this work check out under wealthworks.org. Lots of really practical materials on how to develop value chains, not just food systems value chains, but in other sectors, whether it's sustainable timber, energy, a lot of other areas of being able to do this work. And so they break down the value chain into kind of different partners that exist and the roles they play within it. On the kind of transactional level, that's the kind of that supply chain that we'll find in any really food supply chain. You'll have your producers, you'll have your aggregators and distributors and processors, and ultimately your buyers and consumers. That's your transactional partners. But beyond that, you certainly get your demand partners. So those are your school districts, hospitals, grocery chain. And today, what we really want to focus on are these support partners. They both include value chain coordinators who might be overlooking the entire value chain, but in many other cases, they may be support partners within a value chain. And so, you know, in this particular example, might be that there's a nonprofit farmers alliance that works directly with growers to help build their capacity. There might be a food safety trainer involved. There might be, like in this case, a healthy kid agency that is helping to promote the health benefits of eating certain foods. And so what we have today are value chain coordinators and support partners. We have business incubator example or case study. We'll have a value chain coordinator today, and then we'll have a funder. On the business incubator side, we'll have John Flory and Jaime Villalaz. On the value chain coordinator side, we'll have Ben Bartley from Lamont. And then on the funder side, which of course is another key partner in developing value chains, we'll have Olivia Rabineau from Capital Impact Partners. So that's enough of me rambling on. Now I'd like to introduce our first case study and speakers for today, which is John Flory and Jaime Villalaz. And so here's their background. I'll start with John. John is a Special Projects Director for Latino Economic Development Center. He has been a small business lender for LEDC for 14 years and is currently supporting development of Latino and other immigrant farmers and agricultural cooperatives. John played a key role in organizing the Shared Ground Farmers Cooperative, which is a local food hub. He's also established the Kitchen Incubator and was part of the staff of LEDC, who co-developed the Worth Cooperative Grocery in a low-income food desert in North Minneapolis. So he's touched the farmer side, the food hub side, the Kitchen Incubator, and the food co-op retail space. It's wonderful to have John with us today. And joining John is Jaime Villalaz. Jaime has been working with LEDC since April 2010, and he's been providing a lot of technical assistance to Latino businesses since 2010. And then he's also started to work with Latino farmers and organized cooperatives in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Florida. You might want to explain the Florida bit because it's a little further away, but of course, where you're needed, you go, right? Among his specific activities of technical assistance include agricultural cooperative development, agricultural and business loan packaging, accounting, and marketing. So without further ado, John and Jaime, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes describing Latino Economic Development Center a little bit. Latino Economic Development Center is a small, ethnically based community development corporation operating in Minnesota. We were founded by Latino immigrant entrepreneurs brought together by a faith-based community organizing effort committed to asset-based community development. That philosophy assumes that the most effective community development will be led by members of the community, even if they are disenfranchised, low-income individuals. I've been the token Anglo in the organization since its inception, serving as a bridge between two cultures and an agent for access to financial resources. LEDC grew out of the Mercado Central market. You see the building on the left and the first board of directors on the right. That project brought together 47 Latino micro businesses under one roof to open an indoor market, which began the transformation of a commercial strip that was on its way down. All of those micro businesses grew to sales of approximately $4 million each, a tamale manufacturer, a tortilla bakery, a restaurant, and a grocery store. Their owners began as dishwashers, kitchen helpers, and a delivery truck driver. Our success in an urban community brought requests from Latino agricultural workers across the state. Many of these individuals first came to the U.S. as migrant farm workers. In response to their requests, we began developing a pathway that would enable a farm worker to become a farm owner. Jaime will describe our first effort at that and the success we've had in that regard. If a dishwasher can become the owner of a tortilla factory, a farm worker can become a farm owner. LEDC is unique in several respects in addition to our development philosophy. Beginning immigrant farmers will fail without a comprehensive program that includes technical assistance, access to farmland, access to financing, and access to markets. We support development in each of these areas and strive to integrate businesses across the system. In addition, we entered agricultural development work from a business development perspective, not a farm production perspective, and we have a strong commitment to the cooperative ownership model.
And this is Jaime Villas. I will be talking about the case study Agua Gorda. And I've been working from day one with this group that, let's say, way back to December of 2011. This is the group that it's of the co-op members in their field. They are based in Lone Prairie, Minnesota, which is right in the middle of the state, which is approximately 120 miles northwest of the Twin Cities. What we faced when we decided to go to that particular town and start the agricultural co-ops in Minnesota, this is what we found. This is a small town of 3,500 population, 35% of Latinos, all of them from Agua Gorda, Michoacan, and Mexico, and there are two main employers, a turkey processing plant and a meat packing company in the area. The typical household is a two-parent household with two children and approximately $35,000 in income. When John sent me to do this type of work, I needed something to attract their attention, and I use the term economic opportunities for Latinos, and this is one of the first meeting we had in Lone Prairie in December 2011. After several meetings, we decided to form, well, they decided to form Agua Gorda Co-op in Lone Prairie. And we had several meetings throughout the winter of 2012, and they were ready to start farming in May 2012. Among the trainings we provide to them is co-op formation, farm plan, and also business training. We also included some farm tours to one of the local Latino farmers in the area, the few Latino farmers in the area. And if there is, obviously, they will have more additional training, but this is as they are progressing their small farm. This is how they started with probably less than a half an acre, and we encouraged them to start small, less than an acre. This is 6 plots, 40 by 40, in the community gardens in Lone Prairie. We also, our unique model is to bring the training to their communities. And this particular picture, it shows one of our, the agricultural instructor, how to use some of the farm equipment. We have to play a critical role in order for them to succeed. And we guaranteed their first working capital loan in 2012, and then we provide technical assistance to them to obtain a $9,000 loan with Share Capital Co-op in 2013, and then an additional $10,000 loan with Agstar, which is a regional bank here in the area. And finally, in 2012, they were ready to buy their 2015, excuse me. They were ready to buy their farm, a 54-acre farm, and we, as an agency, we provide the lending, the $150,000. Also, we assist them to buy quality used equipment for their farms, and this is part of the equipment they're learning to use. New technology, basic technology. As they grow, they need to expand their farms. And keep in mind, they started with less than a half an acre in 2012, and now they own their own farm with 54 acres. Market is a critical part of the expansion, and they have to sell in order to succeed and to survive. Without sales, basically, there's no.
Are these tomatillos?
Yes, these are tomatillos.
Let me break in and mention that a key contract with Agua Gorda was to sell tomatillos. This year, 35,000 pounds of tomatillos to make green sauce to the tamale maker that started up in Mercado Central in 1999. This has been a key part of their success, this contract to grow tomatillos.
Because of that modest success, they needed some unique certification, which is the Good Agricultural Practice, which is the GAP certification, and also they are certified organic for the third year in a row. In 2013, they lost about 50% of the revenue due to lack of sales. So this is what John just talked about it and designed the contract with Tomatillo. Because of this particular problem they had in 2013, they joined a marketing co-op, Shareground Marketing Co-op, and this year they signed a new contract with Minnesota Fresh, which is a processing produce company for $35,000. Keep in mind that they sold about $6,500 in 2012, and now they're close to $100,000 in 2017. And also they provide employment to the community. This is what looks the co-op right now. They already have some hoop houses, and they're expanding rapidly.
I mean, this
because
is
of
Jeff.
the yes.
Sorry, let me ask a quick question that came through,
yes.
but also I think it's interesting for the whole group. Two things, and I'll ask both, and then you can answer them. One is, they ended up purchasing their own land, which is incredible. But what was the original land they were using when they first got started? Whose land was it? What kind of agreement was it? And then secondly, I think just for anyone doing cooperative development or this type of value chain development, how were you able to finance the technical assistance, your time, other people's time to get the cooperative up and running?
Okay, I'll answer the first one, and John will take care of the second. Quickly, I went to the city of Lone Prairie and asked for a small portion of land. And at the beginning, they were not sure about that possibility because it was the community gardens were designed to for the residents in the community. However,
or individuals.
However, after a second conversation, they changed their mind and they accepted to provide some land. To begin their business.
The second year, they leased land in the city's industrial park that had been waiting for 10 years for industrial development, and it had never arrived. They grew there for 3 years before they bought the property adjacent to the industrial park. The second question, we began receiving federal funds through the Rural Co-op Development Grant Program, and have been very fortunate to receive substantial support from various USDA programs.
All right, great. And I swear to God, people out there, it wasn't a plant question. I really didn't know where the financing came from, so it wasn't just a USDA plug. All right, thanks, John. Jaime, continue. Sorry to cut you, to interrupt you.
Yep. Quickly, this is because of the modest success we have had with organizing co-ops in several parts of the country. We concluded that we had to pass our knowledge and our experience to other Latino co-op organizers. We conducted a 4-day training in Sebring, Florida. This is a LEDC collaboration with the University of Wisconsin Center for Co-ops, the Democracy at Work Institute, and the Farm Worker Association of Florida. And we possibly will have another training in Washington State. John?
So I want to go on to some of the other issues we have addressed, and the first has to do with access to farmland. The Twin Cities area is the second largest population of Hmong refugees in the country after Fresno. Many of the Hmong families, to raise cash to support their family incomes, begin vegetable farming on very small plots that they leased around the Twin Cities area. Most of them live in St. Paul and Minnesota area. When we first began interviewing prospective immigrant farmers, we hired a Hmong organizer to interview Hmong farmers who dominate in this area, dominate the farmers market. Some of them have been selling for 20 years. Our question was, what are the barriers to developing a sustainable business? Since you aren't really earning enough from farming to make a living, it's just a supplement to other work you do. And far and away, the biggest issue was access to farmland, because these farmers were leasing 1 to 3 acres close to the Twin Cities, but they didn't have, they only leased them on annual leases, and they never knew whether they were going to get access to the same farmland again. So we said to Paku Hang, the organizer, why don't you form a Hmong Farmers Association? If they need access to land, we have been able to get $1 million financing to buy a building for a tortilla manufacturer. Let's find a prime piece of farmland, and let's raise $1 million and buy it. And that's what we did. Go back to the other screen for just a minute. A socially responsible investor in the San Francisco area purchased a 155-acre farm for over $1 million, leased it to the Hmong American Farmers Association with an option to buy it after 8 years. 20 Hmong farmers are farming on that land. Let's go on to the next. For marketing, the loss of half of the produce grown by shared ground, grown by Agua Gorda Cooperative in the second year, in spite of promises of some of our clients to buy the production, made us realize that marketing was critical. Getting access to markets was critical to the success of the farmers we were developing. And we helped organize Shared Ground Farmers Cooperative, which was a collaborative between Stone's Throw Urban Farm, and the picture on the right is one of the members of Stone's Throw, Robin Major, who became the first manager of Shared Ground. It was a collaboration between Anglo-urban farmers, graduates, recent graduates from university, who could get access to chef-driven restaurants and other buyers, and a collaboration with the Latino growers out in the country that had a lot more farm land available to them and could produce volume that the urban farm could not produce. Together, by the fourth year, Shared Ground is selling $400,000 of primarily, well, it's not all certified organic, but it's raised through an organic process to 25 upscale chef-driven restaurants, to co-op grocery stores, and is buying from 24 or 25 farmers 9 of which are member owners. 8 of those 9 are Latino farmers, and they maintain control and direction of the cooperative. More Anglo farmers will be invited to join as the organization becomes more stable. Let's move on to the next screen. In 2015, we opened an incubator kitchen on the bluff. You see a representative group of, I think, mostly Hmong. There's Hmong farmers. We opened this. We were driven by requests from farmers to be able to process vegetables, to extend their market, and to be able to sell seconds that they couldn't sell on a retail basis. This is still in development, although we have 15 small business entrepreneurs at least kitchen time. The farmer-owned processing businesses are in development this year. We also have worked on the retail level, and Worth Cooperative Grocery Store. The building is on the right. I think it was before it opened. The board of directors is the group of people. This is a consumer cooperative in a food desert in North Minneapolis. The 4 neighborhoods this serves are 80% people of color. 42% of the households are on food stamps. LEDC got a $500,000 grant through Health and Human Services Healthy Food Financing Initiative. We bought $500,000 of preferred stock in the cooperative that leveraged $600,000 of additional public and private combination of grants and loans, but primarily loans. This store opened on August 10th of this year. The condition LEDC put on the investment of $500,000 was that the co-op make its best effort to buy 25% of their produce from immigrant farmers, either from Hmong American Farmers Association or Latino farmers that are clients of ours, or from a small group of urban farmers in North Minneapolis. It's very unusual. We have found it very unusual for an organization our size to reach across the whole food system. We were pushed to do this because we thought we started with the farmers, and if we did not provide each of these, either if we did not provide these services or could not find a partner organization to provide these, they would fail. And we've seen this happen in other communities where training is provided, but after people are trained, immigrant farmers are trained, there isn't adequate support to get access to land, to get access to financing, to get access to markets. Thank you.
Thank you, John and Jaime. There is just a ton of questions rolling in about your work, but we're going to hold it for now so that we give enough time for our other speakers who also, are, like yourselves, are really doing inspiring work. So with that, I'd like to introduce Benjamin Bartley from Lamont CoOp. Benjamin is the value chain specialist for Lamont CoOp, a retail, cooperative, and regional food distributor in New Mexico. He has more than 15 years of experience in the food industry, including professional development at the Culinary Institute of America and also at the University of Vermont's Food Hub Management Program. Benjamin was previously the Food Access Director at the Arcadia Center for Sustainable Food and Agriculture in Washington, D.C. They ran and still do run a remarkable mobile market program thanks to a lot of Benjamin's early work. So it's a pleasure to have Benjamin, and look forward to your presentation.
Great. Hello all, and thank you. It's a pleasure to contribute to this panel and to share Lamont CoOp's work around equity and regional food systems development. I've got a number of slides with content, so I wanted to start with a simple visual. In short, Lamont CoOp is in the business of selling and moving food. We do this with a focus on local food, so we source a lot of our products directly from local farms and ranches. This is the perspective we're hoping to bring to this webinar, a business that is actively engaged with its regional food shed. But before I go into more depth on that, let me first describe a little bit who La Montañita is. As the name suggests, La Montañita CoOp is a cooperative. We are New Mexico's largest community-owned, local, and natural foods retailer. We operate 6 grocery stores throughout the state, have a central distribution center, which is collectively owned by our 16,000 member owners. The slides seem to be moving on their own, Jeff. I don't know if that's something you can fix, but we are 41 years old, and we had annual sales last year of about $41 million. As a retailer, we live within a razor-thin margin, and we're constantly having to evolve and adapt to what is becoming an increasingly competitive marketplace. But as a values-driven retailer, we use those values to distinguish ourselves among our competitors by doing business in such a way that we create market opportunities for new farms as well as grow existing farms. We enable our shoppers to support their local economy by shopping at us, their locally owned business, which stocks other local products. And we develop our local food sector by offering different funding mechanisms. We provide business development services, do food safety education, have wholesale distribution, and more. Now, we do all of this in accordance with our ends or mission. These ends are what our board of directors benchmark La Montañita's business activities against, and they include increased access to and purchase of healthy food, supporting a growing regenerative agriculture sector, support a thriving and sustainable local economy, and also support a strengthened cooperative community. In terms of how we do this, Jim's presentation around value chain coordination is a helpful framework. When you have the chance, check out the USDA's value chain program called Food Link, which Wallace also describes on their website and which includes this definition. As you can see, equity is embedded into the value chain approach, and La Montañita's role in this space is as a regional coordinator. We do this by having frank, transparent conversations with our vendors around their business goals and how they align with market expectations, as well as then doing the actual work of realizing positive business outcomes for everybody involved, whether that results in La Montañita writing a check to a vendor, or if we end up matching a vendor with a better, more scale-appropriate buyer. Either way, the goal is a business transaction at the end of the day. Now, that being who La Montañita is, I want to also describe the environment in which we work. New Mexico is a majority state with communities of color collectively comprising about 60% of the population. Another way to look at the state's demographics is reflected in a phrase that you'll frequently hear in New Mexico, which is that we didn't cross the border crossed us. Which is all to say that when you look at New Mexico's agricultural landscape, you're inherently looking at a diverse farmer and rancher community, one which has a long history with deep, centuries-old roots. With regards to economic metrics, New Mexico ranks 45th in the nation for median income, which essentially equates to 1 in 5 New Mexicans living below the poverty line. This is disproportionately true for Hispanics, Native Americans, and African Americans, as it is for many communities of color across the country. New Mexico also ranks 50th in poverty among those who work full-time year-round, meaning the availability of living wage jobs here is severely lacking. Suffice it to say, the importance of finding ways to leverage local food as a means for building community wealth is particularly high in our state. So when you're talking about value chain coordination, it's important to note that it can take many forms, as Jim laid out with the slide there, including all the rules. But for the purposes of this case study, I'll be limiting our work to the following, which are the activities that we at La Montañita seem to do the most of. These value chain activities can generally be described as vendor development, product development, technical assistance, and resource prospecting. So let me begin with vendor development and our work developing Taos Pueblo as a source for native beef. In New Mexico, there are 19 distinct Pueblos or Native American communities. Many pueblos manage their own bison herd, and a number of them raise bison specifically for human consumption, primarily for their community members on reservation. Several of these pueblos, however, are increasingly interested in selling off reservation as a means for supplemental income to the tribe, as well as to individual stockmen. From the market side, Lamont CoOp's stores have a demonstrable and quantifiable demand for bison, which we currently have to source from national vendors. So given these two realities, my colleague and I began to assess whether we couldn't match this known demand with a local source for bison. We started by reaching out first to all the pueblos that raise bison in some capacity, and it didn't take long before it became apparent that cold calling was not going to get us very far. So my colleague drew upon his wider network, which he's developed over nearly 30 years of ranching in New Mexico. And he eventually found a contact who could vouch for us with these native communities. This intermediary was someone who had worked in various capacities around economic development for a number of tribes, and he ended up having to work through one of his contacts who worked at a Native American Arts Institute to get us in touch with the right person at Taos Pueblo. The whole point of this 7 degrees of separation story is simply to show how important relationships are. Making local food work so often relies on strong personal contacts, and this was particularly the case when trying to make an inroad with a prospective Native American vendor for bison. And this was all necessary just to get the conversation started. Negotiations have been ongoing with Taos for more than a year now. And during this time, we've had to address everything from pricing to processing logistics, as well as assuage Taos's reticence around payment. Taos had attempted to sell their bison to another commercial buyer some time ago, and from what we understand, payment was either long delayed or never fully issued in that instance. So in an effort to both recognize and honor their past experience, we decided to write an MOU that laid out the proposed arrangement, what it would look like from A to Z, who was responsible for what both parties' expectations were, and specifically Lamont CoOp's prompt payment within a business day of slaughter of the animals. And this was, collectively all necessary to build confidence in the relationship and to ensure that everybody was receiving a fair shake for their part in the value chain. And, similar to vendor development is our work around product development. And 2 initiatives I wanted to highlight were our efforts with Anthony Youth Farm and Agricultura. Both are farmer training and marketing organizations that focus on low resource and minority growers. Anthony and Agricultura primarily sell direct to consumer, but both have grown to scale where they need more outlets. So they've both reached out to Lamont CoOp as an avenue to access new wholesale accounts. For each vendor, we began by narrowing down their wholesale prospects to a couple of products that they, A, already had a history of growing well, and B, were interested in scaling. For Anthony, we helped them figure out an appropriate unit size, case size, and pricing for bunch radishes, as well as developed a packaged spinach product, which Lamont CoOp's marketing department helped design the label for. Anthony, New Mexico is located in the far southern part of the state, so our distribution and its existing routes basically leveraged our infrastructure to coordinate backhauling to get their product to buyers in central and northern New Mexico. We did similar work with Agricultura to develop a retail-ready salad mix, which you can see on the right, in which our distribution center sources the plastic containers for. And for both the spinach and salad mix products, we reviewed their traceability protocols and helped to develop lot codes that could be included on the labels, satisfying both the expectations of the produce department leads who would be handling and shelving the product, as well as the end consumers actually buying them. And traceability is a great bridge to talk about a related facet of our value chain work, and that is the provision of food safety technical assistance. As I'm sure many in the audience can agree, the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA, has brought food safety to the forefront for both farmers and local food systems advocates alike. And while the vast majority of growers in New Mexico are small and thus either exempt or just subject to slimmed down requirements of FSMA, there's still this movement in the wider wholesale marketplace to adopt the law's full standards, essentially requiring compliance with FSMA for any vendor wanting to sell into intermediated supply chains, kind of regardless of the grower size. And this presents a difficulty since regulations are rarely scale neutral. Add to this the fact that many FSMA food safety trainings are overly scientific and or designed for classroom learning, and you've got some serious barriers to entry for limited resource farmers. In an effort to address these issues, Lamont CoOp has been developing food safety workshops that are practical, tiered, and hosted on farm. Basically in an environment where growers are more comfortable and where the principles being discussed can be illustrated through real life examples discussed at the workshop itself. We offer these trainings throughout the year as well as throughout the state to accommodate the differing needs and availabilities of New Mexico growers. And we also have translators present as needed. Next month, for instance, we've got a training schedule that will be hosted by a native Mexican who is a farm worker come farm proprietor. And also many of the workshop attendees will be members of a producer co-op from the nearby Isleta Pueblo. So we'll be catering the program to both Spanish and English speakers. And we always make it a point to do pre-workshop visits with host farmers, where we get to address the host's specific concerns and questions as they relate to food safety, as well as how his or her property, workflow, current practices all stack up against best practices and FSMA requirements. Lastly, an important part of Lamont CoOp's value chain work is helping local food entrepreneurs secure financial resources. To this end, one of our services is helping vendors write proposals for funding opportunities like the USDA's Value-Added Producer Grant. This is a great grant opportunity that's available for all types of growers, which is intended to help farmers and ranchers access new markets and grow existing ones. The grant application, I would say, though, is fairly onerous and can be very intimidating to farmers. And of the two value-added producer grants, or VAPGs, that we've helped secure for New Mexico vendors, neither were for people of color. And I would say that if you're just looking at it from an administrative perspective, this could be in part a reflection of the application process itself and how it requires a lot of baseline requirements from applicants, like formal business incorporation documents, written business plans, registration with a slew of entities like grants.gov, DUN, SAM, and the like. So, it's hard for any grower to meet these eligibility requirements. And if you're limited resource, you may not have all these boxes checked or simply don't know all the steps necessary for eligibility. This, at least was something I learned firsthand from helping two applicants navigate this process. This all being said, assisting low resource farmers and ranchers is still something that Lamont CoOp should and is going to be more proactive about in terms of how we do outreach for this opportunity and who we help with these types of grants. Lastly, Lamont CoOp also provides a different kind of funding, which is the CoOps microcredit loan program. Lamont CoOp funds these loans in-house and has partnered with a local credit union to actually administer the program. These microloans are below market rate that we offer to local food entrepreneurs who cannot access traditional financing due to their business maturity, their credit history, or simply the amount of funds that they're seeking. I think currently we have 5 loans with entrepreneurs of color out of a total portfolio of about 14. To be sure, though, setting up an accredited loan program is no small task. I know it took our membership committee, the membership department here at Lamont CoOp some years just to work with the SEC and get it established. But if this sounds like something you're interested in pursuing, we have found it to be a great way to support all of our vendors, particularly communities which have historically had a harder time accessing credit. It looks like I'm probably nearing my time limit, so I'll just leave this slide up if it doesn't change itself, but it basically sums up what we've learned to be best practices around value chain coordination, particularly how we try to incorporate a social equity lens into our work with local farmers and ranchers.
Great, thank you, Benjamin. That's another fantastic presentation, and we are at time, but there has been a couple questions. A lot of folks are asking questions like, wow, this is really pretty awesome work, the value chain coordination work you've been able to do with La Montanita, and fundamental question is, how does La Montanita fund your position, or how are you funding your value chain coordination position?
So my position was created about 2 years ago. This was through a cooperative agreement with the USDA. That was that food link program I referenced earlier that you can find on USDA and Wallace's website. And Food Link is essentially funded in part by USDA Rural Development and in part by a local foundation. In our case, this was the Thornburg Foundation. And that was essentially the seed capital to get my position started and to give me some runway to actually show some demonstrable outcomes from this work. Since then, we've from a values-based business perspective, seen that this is a valuable use of our funds in the sense that, not only does it meet our ends and the mission I showed earlier, but, it does end up having transactions made, and therefore you could argue that some of the earned revenue from those activities, could help fund the position. So, yeah, catalyst was USDA. I would argue Lamont CoOp has been doing this work for more than a decade, though, and they were essentially using their own income to fund that itself in the form of kind of Steve Warschauer as Lamont CoOp's enterprise development manager. And we continue to, pursue other grant opportunities, largely around kind of food safety, because we see that kind of as the big next barrier for market access. So still kind of using internal funds and trying to leverage external grants and philanthropic monies to advance this work.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, and if people are interested in more on value chain coordination, I think about a year or so ago, we did one where Steve Warschauer from La Montanita was on talking about the value chain coordination work. And yes, this is nothing new. And it's just, I think more recently than not, we're just trying to highlight a lot of the value chain coordination work as just an essential piece of scaling local regional food systems. And it was great in many ways for Steve Warschauer to be able to pass the baton on to Benjamin and the good work he's been doing now for La Montanita. Okay, thanks, Benjamin. I'd like to turn to our next presenter. Okay, great, she's up on the screen. Olivia Rabanal is from Capital Impact Partners. She is the director of their loan programs. Capital Impact Partners is a CDFI, which is a community development financial institution that has deployed over $2 billion to serve 5 million people in our communities in various sectors, that being the healthcare sector, education, elder communities, healthy food cooperatives, and affordable housing. So Capital Impact Partners really touches almost every aspect of our lives. Olivia manages CIPs, which is Capital Impact Partners' Healthy Food Financing Strategy Initiatives and Partnerships, which she'll be talking about today. Olivia, a little more background on her. Olivia has been a lender with the CDFI community for over 10 years and holds a BA in, this is a cool BA, in Biomedical Ethics from Brown University. Love it. And then an MPA in Public Finance. Less interesting, but obviously got her job at New York University's Wagner School of Public Service. Olivia, wonderful to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Also in the editorial comments on my degrees there. It is a pretty unique program. So I'm here to talk to you about how we feel at Capital Impact Partners about building inclusive food systems. I just wanted to take a step back and share with you how equity and inclusion is thread throughout our entire organization. This is our mission. Through capital and commitment, we are looking to build communities of opportunity. And we envision a nation of communities that have opportunity built on a foundation of equity, inclusiveness, and cooperation. I was really pleased to see the lineup. My co-panelists today, our organization was actually born out of the cooperative movement, and it is really unique that we have highlighted 2 cooperative examples preceding me, because we fully support the wealth creation component and ownership component that democratic structures like cooperatives bring to our communities. But to talk a little bit more about the work that we do, and as Jim mentioned, $2 billion we've deployed across our 30 years of activity to benefit 5 million people throughout the country in different sectors. You see that we do work with healthcare centers, we build facilities for them, we work with alternative education facilities and finance their construction where no other quality educational alternatives exist. And we're really going to be focusing today on our healthy food initiatives and our work in building inclusive food systems. I also wanted to mention that we do have a focus on supporting elders, low-income seniors, age in place to have quality of life. And we also are a builder of affordable housing, particularly in areas of rapid growth and development. And we have published a paper called Toward Inclusive Growth in our approach to redevelopment in rapidly developing areas. And Detroit is our #1 example of that, where we have very focused and concentrated redevelopment efforts that encompass our inclusive strategy. Our work, our vision and mission is hedged on 4 strong strategic pillars, and I wanted to elevate them here and share them with you. Our work is working to address systemic poverty, and our work in food systems, we believe we do that because the food economy creates opportunities for local business ownership that we can find throughout the supply chain that we were referencing earlier today, the value chain framework. And we do have programming to support business opportunities, job opportunities across the value chain, including through local cooperative ownership, which we've talked about a little bit earlier. We also are looking to create equity, support equitable access to services and economic opportunity within the food economy in particular we're talking about today. An inclusive food system is one where we believe we are engaging and empowering those individuals that have been disproportionately negatively impacted by the lack of access to healthy food, or they've been historically excluded by the food economy in production, distribution, the sale of healthy food. We're really intentional and very focused on making sure that they have opportunity with the growth of the food economy as well. We also are working to build healthy communities. I think this is, it goes unsaid in the work that we do in healthy food. We are also in this space working to make linkages across our sectors. So for example, we are looking to locate a federally qualified health clinic to serve the underinsured and uninsured at a supermarket. Or we are looking to locate a supermarket, a full-scale supermarket on the ground floor of a clinic that might reside upstairs, or a school, which are facilities we have also developed. And again, we are looking to promote inclusive growth. And I referenced our work in Detroit, where we have published our work there in building diverse mixed income communities so we can create economic mobility and empowering individuals. In the food systems space in particular, we do believe that many food systems work and opportunities have a very approachable career pathway with low barriers to entry that can help to promote economic mobility. We have been supporters of social enterprises that create job opportunities and training programs, for example, for re-entering citizens. I'm not sure if text appears in this visual that you might see in front of you. It doesn't on mine, but this image is to demonstrate that there is a stark inequity that continues to exist in our communities. 1 out of 10 people in the US still lack access to fresh, affordable, and healthy food. Just to give you a broad glimpse of our work in food systems, we have deployed $150 million in our food systems work, and we have a long track record of being a leader in healthy food financing. We were the original fund administrator of the California FreshWorks Fund, which is an initiative that brought $70 million into underinvested communities and brought full-scale supermarkets back where they did not exist. We were also the fund manager for the National Cooperative, National Grocers Cooperative and their development fund to be able to grow and expand cooperatives in some of our communities. And currently we are the fund manager for the Michigan Good Food Fund, which I'll delve into a little bit more now. Before I do so, I wanted to lay out the way that we kind of intentionally do our work. We went through a process to develop a logic model tool to help us visualize and articulate our theory of change. All of these activities really are leading up to some of the outcomes we expect to achieve. And you'll notice that, a lot of these outcomes and impacts have to do with more equitable access and serving a population that has been historically excluded or underserved. And our impact we envision to be a more equitable society, one that has stimulated the local economy, where we have reduced barriers and reduced poverty and greater civic engagement. The activities, the way that we accomplish this work is through a variety of financing products. We are a direct lender. We also work with intermediaries to allow us to penetrate the community more deeply. Our intermediary partners typically have greater relationships in the communities where we work and in some of our priority communities. We are typically an allocatee of the New Market Tax Credit Program. This is a federal program and the recipients of the tax credits go through a competitive process to apply. And now I wanted to turn our attention to the work that we have done through the Michigan Good Food Fund. This program was established in 2015, and it is a public-private partnership, a $30 million loan fund, of which we are the fund manager. We work closely with partners throughout the state, and our two core partners are the Fair Food Network that helps us provide technical assistance and pipeline development for smaller retail statewide. We also work with MSU's Center for Regional Food Systems, who brings to us great relationships in the agricultural and protein processing community. Our impact to date is that we've deployed $10.5 million in good food enterprises. We've supported over 47 businesses with financing and business assistance. We do this through workshops, through our financing programs, as well as through workshops and webinars. We have another intensive coming up next month in Flint, where we'll be doing a 3-day intensive to develop and support and catalyze the growth of good food enterprises in Flint in particular. All of this activity in the past couple of years has resulted in over 390 jobs created and retained all throughout the value chain. The Michigan Good Food Fund emerged from the Michigan Good Food Charter. And our charter was convened, it is supported by a task force that helped us create very specific programmatic objectives. Our mission-driven lens to this work involves a focus on 5 dimensions, including healthy food access, economic development, racial and social equity, local sourcing, and environmental stewardship. We use a tool to help us determine how well we are meeting these objectives with any entrepreneur or enterprise that comes to us, seeking either technical assistance or financial assistance. And to go into greater detail about how we do this, I thought I'd show you some of the categories. In the healthy food access dimension, we are looking at whether an enterprise markets, promotes, and places fresh produce and perishable foods. This is important to us in particular in underserved communities because those communities are saturated with unhealthy, highly processed, high sugar products. And so it is even more important in those communities that entrepreneurs that are selling and distributing healthy food have a program to promote, market, and place fresh product in the forefront. We also are talking to people and asking them questions about their participation in Michigan's version of SNAP benefits and the Double Up program. And this tells us that if they are participants in that program, they are serving those that are eligible for EBT and SNAP benefits. We are looking for enterprises that are making local foods affordable and competitive. The grocery industry, as many of us probably know, is a very razor-thin margin industry. And operators often look for any opportunity to mark up product at a premium. One of those products, following trends now, is to mark up local food. We do look for enterprises that are trying to retain the affordability of their product for their customers. A great example of this is one of our borrowers in our portfolio from Grand Rapids, a family-owned operator, Ken's Supermarket, sources local and retains a very affordable price and is committed to retaining an affordable price for their customers. We also ask questions specific to our objectives in racial and social equity. We want to support more enterprises within the food economy that are owned and operated by people of color, low-income residents, and women. We're also asking questions about whether the enterprises are employing these individuals that we want to provide opportunities for within the food economy. We ask questions about cultural appropriateness of product, which will vary from community to community. And we ask about whether these individuals fall within their target market. We also measure enterprises based on their economic opportunities that they provide to their employees. We're looking for career ladders, advancement, job training, on-the-job training. We're looking to support enterprises that hires from the communities where they're located. We ask them from how far away they're recruiting their employees. Many of the entrepreneurs that we're working with are located in low-income communities, but not all the time are they hiring from within the community, and so this is very important to us. The Michigan Good Food Fund has a serious commitment to racial and social equity, and I referenced earlier in the advisory council, actually I referenced it as a task force, which has become our advisory council for our program. We have a group of about 30 community members and other stakeholders who serve on this advisory council, who are convened twice yearly. Our most recent convening in March spent a half day with a cultural competency session. We asked a professional from Michigan State University to conduct a session called Exploring Cultural Competency for Personal, Organizational, and Community Change, recognizing that this is just the first step of exploring issues of race, power, and class systems within the food system among our advisory council group. They were overwhelmingly satisfied with hosting this session. They agreed we need to do this more and maybe expand it even to a full day session. So that is a little bit about how we feel we are promoting equity and inclusion in our food systems work. And I'm sure that we'll have more time for conversation in our next section.
Yeah, thank you so much, Olivia. That was fantastic. And we do have a good 12 or so minutes to answer some questions. Let me get one specific one for you first, Olivia. And it came from one of our attendees who is wondering, have any of your projects focused on value-added or processed produce that could be sold frozen or in another kind of non-fresh form? So just curious about kind of that value-added component of any projects like that.
Yes, one of our projects is a processor. Actually, it is a collective of 3 or 4 entrepreneurs that are smaller batch processor. Their facility is located just outside of Detroit, and their entity that they have formed is called Feast. So the financing that we provided them helped secure their facility, which will be used for processing, co-packing, some cooperative buying, and recipe development.
Okay, cool. And this is a little more of a more general question, but I think for those folks who maybe not as familiar with community development financial institutions, there was a couple questions about like how do you have all this money in the first place? Like how do you ultimately deploy $2 billion? Where does $2 billion come from?
Thank you. Yes. Capital Impact Partners is a community development financial institution. We're a national nonprofit lender with that, and as I mentioned, we have a national footprint. We do have access to a variety of types of financing. One large portion of our source of capital will be from institutional banks who work with us to be able to fulfill some of their community development goals. Those kinds of institutional banks might be Bank of America or Citibank. The federal government also has we are certified through the Department of Treasury, which historically has been able to support CDFIs like ours and hundreds of others nationwide with a grant program. We're able to leverage our dollars as well, those grant dollars, to access the dollars from the institutional markets. As I mentioned, we also have more activity through program-related investments through some philanthropic investors and partners.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, just sometimes it's almost overwhelming to see that dollar figure, but that helps. So this is a question to you all, and this is kind of my question, although there's others we will certainly get to as well. You know, you have all, everyone who's presented today has really showed tremendous success incubating businesses, financing businesses, helping to develop new products and for the marketplace. But I didn't hear a lot about failure, or we can say it more softly in terms of challenges or shortcomings to your approach. And so I'd like each of you just to spend a couple of minutes to, like, obviously there's been roadblocks, there's been times where things have been difficult, or something that you thought would be really easy and ended up being what you spent your most time on, and other things you thought were going to be really hard and it actually didn't take a lot of your effort. So starting with John and Jaime, can you just guys, just pick a particular, it could be an example, it could be a philosophy approach. Let's hear about some shortcomings and, in some cases, how you've been able to overcome those and how they might have even led to some successes.
Well, I will start. Well, in 15 minutes, we can't describe both successes and failures. Especially working with beginning small farmers and getting access to markets is extremely difficult. I have spent 40 years working with startup small businesses, and I thought that was hard. Working with startup small farmers is even harder. and you have to develop the support systems, or they will. My conviction is almost all of them will fail. And so you can't just meet with an entrepreneur that's got a great idea and a lot of ambition and help guide them and help them develop a plan and finance them, and then they're off and running, and half of them are successful. With farming, with beginning farmers, you have to develop a whole support system. We've organized, we talked about the Alamogordo Cooperative. These are what we call farm incubator cooperatives, where a group of people work as a team on the farm. We've organized 8 of these. Several of them have failed. One of them failed in the first year. Another one, members of the cooperative left and they dissolved the cooperative, but 2 brothers continued as individual farmers. So there are challenges. Some of the challenges for us, actually, we are not, operating cooperatives is not the primary goal, at least in growing. Operating incubator cooperatives are a way to include a group of 5 to 8 people in a team that learn, and over a period of time, the ones that are really committed to farming rise to the top, and a number of people quit. We think that for marketing, it's almost a requirement that they be part of a marketing cooperative. And so we also work with individual farmers as well that are not part of these cooperatives. Organizing and maintaining cooperatives is very challenging.
Which could be, we could
actually
spend
the market. Markets is extremely challenging, and getting a fair price for the product. One of the reasons we organized a marketing cooperative is because the marketing cooperative pays a much better price than they can get anywhere else. I was reading in the Harvest. I forget the name of the book, Harvesting Opportunity, or something like that. Yep. Farmers that belong to the cooperative get 70% of the price that the marketing cooperative gets from the end user. It's a much better price than they can get anywhere else. So finding a fair price for the product is extremely difficult. I would say those are the 2 biggest challenges. Actually, providing financing, we are a small CDFI. It's not really a big challenge for us to provide financing. We have financing available. If they have a good market, we can loan money to them. We've made about nearly 10%, well, a little bit more than 10% of our loan portfolio is in agricultural loans, $350,000. But we haven't loaned more because the farmers haven't developed a big enough market to support payments, debt payments.
Right. So would anybody else like to respond, Olivia?
Yes, thank you. And so, John, just to piggyback off something that you did say is that you do need to have the technical assistance available to support an entrepreneur. Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of like kind of support services, wraparound services, that it can't just be in many cases, if it's just a one-off, they may be starting the right direction, but there's always another barrier or hurdle in the way, again, whether it's a small farmer or a startup business. Jaime or Benjamin, do you guys have anything you'd like to add to this conversation?
I'm sorry, I was coughing, and so I just wanted to mention that that's what we are aiming to provide through the Michigan Good Food Fund, is a collaborative that is able to support the technical needs of a business to make sure that they are sustainable. Many businesses in our portfolio are financed through ourselves or one of our intermediary partners, but also receives ongoing technical assistance throughout the life of their loan, which would be essential to making sure that the business continues to be viable. In our industry, we like to say that we provide access to capital, but in this work in particular, access to capital is not enough. We need to also make sure that we have enough support services so those entrepreneurs will be successful in the long run. And I think Benjamin also had mentioned this in his presentation. They provide that level of technical assistance, and in addition, have a microloan program to be able to offer a suite of services to help food entrepreneurs.
Benjamin, Jaime?
Well, this time, and
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yes, I support what John just said, that it is really, really hard to work with Latino farmers or immigrant farmers versus a regular business, which basically I've been working for the last 3-4 years with some of regular businesses, and it's with farming it's more complicated. Weather, the short season here in Minnesota markets, and in order for they to have success, definitely we have to provide so much support in all the areas.
And it's technical assistance on call at any time. Jaime with business assistance. Rodrigo Cala, a successful farm client of ours that's been farming organically for 12 years. I forget, 11, 12 years.
10 years.
On call. This is much more intensive support for farmers than we have ever had to provide for small businesses. And they would fail if we didn't provide that.
Benjamin, any final words before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I echo every panelist's experiences and suggestions. You know, the food sector, let alone, you know, ones that's values based and from a production side is pretty cutthroat, small margins, high risk. So in our daily work, I mean, you hear the successes in all of our presentations, but you know, I can't tell you how many calls we get, you know, throughout the week at La Montañita with vendors, you know, just either planting too much product and not having planned for an outlet for what they are now on the verge of harvesting. And, you know, it's reactive in a way. Ideally, you know, we're trying to get to a place where we can be proactive with our vendors and have that product spoken for or have a plan for where it's going before it ever seeds ever planted. But you know, there is also this, obviously, you know, the state of the American farmer, average age being 60 and above, a lot of new folks getting into farming, and you know, this push to have a lot of farmer training programs to help on-ramp growers. But I think all the panelists in kind of a pre-webinar conversation, we all agreed that there's still this gap between, you know, training and getting growers to be competent in production, and then bridging that to market demand. So in that way, I think, like, yes, I see and field and try to react to a lot of potential failures. Inevitably, we don't succeed in every case. But if I had a suggestion for how to limit those failures, it's having more value chain coordination at a market-based entity, a food hub or otherwise, who is well-versed with market expectations, who have, you know, built-in market outlets, like La Montañita's stores are built-in market outlets for our food hub, and trying to, you know, limit the risk and increase kind of the language and the networks that these coordinators can have, so that we can, you know, successfully bridge that gap.
And that's good, sage advice from a young man, but he's certainly been around the track. We all know that. So thank you, Benjamin. And I just want to thank once again all our speakers today: Andrew Dumont from the Fed, John Flory and Jaime Villas from Latino Economic Development Center, Olivia Rebenal from Capital Impact Partners, and Benjamin Bartley from La Montañita. As we have Jeff close us out, I just want to remind everyone that a lot of questions were answered actually in the question box from our speakers. So as Jeff is speaking, if you don't want to hear what he has to say, you can spend a couple of minutes getting those answers. And thank you.
Well, thanks, Jim. And I want to add my thanks to all of the panelists. as well. I'm going to fly through this. There have been several questions about if the webinar is being recorded, and it is. And you can see this webinar posted within a few business days on ngfn.org/webinars. And we have all of our maybe about 70 previous webinars organized by topic there. So dig into the archives. There's really a lot of great content there. Our upcoming webinars are listed here, and I just want to note that you can sign up for these automatically by selecting which webinar is interesting to you in our post-webinar survey. So please fill out the post-webinar survey. The next 3 webinars dig into different themes that emerged in the Wallace Center's report for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. We analyzed over 700 community food organizations, found themes of success, and wrote a book that highlights several wonderful examples across the country. In October, we're looking at the theme of engaging and educating youth in healthy food and food systems. In November, we look at organizations that engage and enrich their community around traditional and cultural foods. And in December, we look at how success in food systems really requires a system, that is a collection of different organizations and practitioners working on shared goals together. And in January, we will host our colleagues at Michigan State University's Center for Regional Food Systems, mentioned in this webinar, as we present our joint effort around and the results around the 3rd Biennial National Food Hub Survey. Again, sign up in the post-webinar survey, and I want you to all mark your calendars for the 4th Biennial National Good Food Network Conference. We are in Albuquerque, New Mexico this spring. We're planning for 500 practitioners of good food. And although we retain our traditional focus on food hubs, we are expanding the scope of the conference this year to include value chain businesses and organizations and coordinators who work with and support food hubs and their mission to aggregate and distribute locally grown food. So if this idea of value chain coordination piques your interest, I'd strongly encourage you to join us in Albuquerque in March. This really is a nuts and bolts conference, and it only comes around every 2 years. So mark your calendars, get on our email lists so you'll be informed of when we release our session request for proposals if you're interested in presenting, and also when we open registration. You can find the Wallace Center and the National Good Food Network on our websites and on social media, and you can also just email us. We are contact@ngfn.org. Again, I'm going to remind you to take 2 minutes to fill out our post-webinar survey that will open in just a moment, and I want to thank you all for your time today. This concludes the webinar.